Hey, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
And we're going to hopefully try to cover a lot of different things today, but we've been talking a lot about ad blocking at Disrupt. I hear it's kind of a thing. And you have actually spoken about this publicly before, including in a speech where you basically said that ad blocking could potentially, or should, push the industry more towards coordination and standards. So you gave that speech last fall.
Yeah.
Do you feel like the progress has been made on that front?
Yeah. It's important to understand that ad blocking is a user problem. It's easy to think of it as some problem that this company's created or something that's externally thrust on us, but it's a user problem. It's happening because users have ads that cover up their pages, that slow down their pages, whose content that they worry about, and the problem is especially bad on mobile. So once you have that perspective, the right solution is for us to do a better job of policing ourselves, than declare it to be someone else's problem. So we've done a lot of research trying to really understand what do users find annoying about ads. We are a quantitative company, so we spend a bunch of time trying to understand that. We're also working with industry bodies like the IAB, which of course has a lean proposal, but we want to make it more actionable and make sure that it's a standard that both advertisers and publishers can follow. It's a fast-moving space. You will hear much more from us over the coming weeks and months, but this is something that we are actively working together on, and there's real momentum behind it. Because people understand that this is a growing problem. Ad blocking is already in the tens of percent already, growing at 30–40% year on year. It's a big deal.
So it sounds like within Google, there will probably be some products or technologies that are responding specifically to this issue.
So we want to make sure that whatever we do is not positioned as a Google solution. We want this to be for the entire industry. So we are leading, we are doing a lot of work, but we want to make sure that we actually work cooperatively with the publishers, with IAB, with everybody that's out there, with the browsers who are a key player here, to make sure that this is a general solution that works for everybody.
Why is it important that it's a Google solution? I mean, not just a Google solution. I mean, you account for an incredible amount of advertising just on your own. Isn't that enough to worry about?
Yes, we do need to worry about it, but a solution that the entire industry accepts is just going to have a lot more credibility. There are lots of great browsers out there. We want them all to adopt this. There are lots of publishers and advertisers. It's important that this be seen as a fair, independent standard rather than something that Google is pushing.
Okay. So moving on to a different topic, I mean, I think one of the big conversations in advertising, probably the big conversation in advertising, is about this shift to mobile. And I can remember, a few years ago where there was a lot of speculation about what is this going to mean for Google? Is Google basically screwed? And it seems like you guys are doing okay. I mean, I'm curious, like, what did it look like from the inside? Was there a lot of doubt? I mean, what was the point where you guys kind of looked at each other and said, oh man, like we really need to rethink what we're doing with advertising for these smartphones?
Yeah, so we've invested in mobile from a very long time. The first ads that we did for mobile, believe it or not, was in circa 2005–6. This was showing ads on feature phones in Japan. That was our first mobile product. So you invested in it for a very long time, but I would say around 3–4 years ago, you could look at things like projections of queries that were coming in from mobile, and you knew it was only a matter of small years before they exceeded that of desktop. This is when we did enhanced campaigns where we basically said mobile is not an optional something to do on the side. It's core to advertising. That was a big wake-up call for the team. And my team also internally went from having, say, 30 or 40 people that were like, were full of zealous enthusiasm about mobile to my needing to tell my entire team, no, all of you have to work on mobile. And the pendulum has firmly shifted the other way, where it's pretty much now anything that we do, we start with mobile first, and then say, how do we adapt the design to desktop? It's a click, and it's firmly happened in our heads. It's something that we need to continuously worry about. Mobile is, of course, is different. Measurement is different. We want to do a lot of brand advertising. That works differently. So there's lots more to go, but I feel comfortable that we've been pretty good at kind of managing this change so far.
Where would you, I mean, it is probably just an ongoing process without like an endpoint, but I mean, would you say that you're still in the fairly early stages of that transition?
I mean, listen, in most countries, there are more mobile queries than desktop queries. I mean, that's just where we are. So I would say, it's not a question of are we headed into the transition. That transition is already here. 2 years from now, we'll likely be saying desktop is 10 or 15% of total traffic. So this is, we are very much into it. There's obviously more work, more opportunity, but I think we are firmly in the mobile era.
Did you find that, I mean, so you said that you had to sort of just the conversation changed. It was, we're not just a few people talking about mobile. It's the whole team. You have to really think about that first. Was there anything else that had to change in the way that you thought about advertising in order to make that transition?
Yeah, so with mobile also introduced lots and lots of opportunities. You could be playing with swipes on screen. So we started thinking about what are formats that begin to take advantage of what is uniquely mobile. We have a lot of infinite sideways scroll. Whenever you search for a product, we let you scroll sideways, see lots of products. So you have to be in a different mindset when it comes to UI design. It's not you're taking a desktop design with a click and adapting it to mobile. You're really thinking, how do users interact with this much, much richer surface? Mobile also introduced other opportunities like the connection to local, which I continue to think is one of is one of these unexplored opportunities within all of advertising, which is how do you help users facilitate the commerce that is around them? So we are doing a lot of work in that area as well. We have a great store visits product that tell advertisers of the people that clicked on an ad, how many actually went and visited the store, say within the next few days. So there's lots of opportunity, unique capabilities. Those are the things that we focus on today.
Mm-hmm. And so on mobile also it becomes a much more app-centric experience. I mean, obviously Google has a whole bunch of apps, but at the same time, sort of the foundation of the advertising business is search. Do you think that that potentially poses a threat to you down the line?
At least right now, we don't think about it that way. We don't think of apps versus web, even for our own Google products, as an either-or. There are many cases where our apps are enormously successful, but there's also a fairly heavy dose of traffic that just comes from mobile web. And more, even retailers are realizing the same thing, or advertisers are realizing the same thing. And so there's more of an emphasis on making sure that people make the right smart investments on both the app side and on the web side. And I think that's introduced a fair amount of peace into how we think about it. We think about these as complementary opportunities. We have a pretty big app promotion business. We're very excited about how well ads in Play Search is doing. And obviously, we have a great mobile web search business. There's much more peaceful coexistence because people are realizing that these are fairly distinct use cases. Not every business and company that's out there can get their app installed by 1 billion users. It's just too expensive. It's too hard. And so they invest in mobile web. So I think these are nice complements. They're working well together.
So you think that in the future that maybe the browser won't sort of dominate the experience the way it has on desktop, but it's still going to be an important component of it?
I actually think that the last word is yet to be written on mobile web versus apps. The app model is still very clunky in that you have to go download something that's like 20-odd megabytes, you wait for 25 seconds, you install it, and then after the first 20 or so apps on your phone, you begin to forget what exactly the apps are that are on your phone, so re-engagement becomes a real issue. I think you'll see both the big operating systems, Android as well as iOS. I'm not speaking as the Android team, I'm the ads guy at Google. Blend these much more closely together, so apps can be used much more on the fly, and you will see browsers like Chrome add more capabilities that make them look and feel more app-like. So there is a convergence, the technical convergence that is coming.
So when I talk to people about the mobile ad landscape, I think the first two names that always come up are Google and Facebook. I'm curious, at Google, how much time do you spend thinking about what Facebook has done and accomplished on the advertising side?
Facebook has done incredibly well, but we are not Facebook. So my team's time is spent focusing on what are uniquely Google's strengths. First and foremost, our biggest strength is that you and I and other users go to Google when they want to learn about something. So search with its intent is incredibly powerful. So having that drive a lot of our thinking is where we end up spending a lot of our time. But we are also not above looking at sort of other ideas that people have. Facebook has led the way in app install advertising, and it certainly is inspiration and competition for us. We are very, very complementary, and I think that mentality helps.
Mm-hmm. I do think that on the data side, that one of the things that Facebook has is sort of all of this social data. Obviously, Google, not necessarily your team, but Google in general has sort of made some forays into social, but it hasn't necessarily been tremendously successful. I mean, is that something that you think is a weakness for Google, not having as much social data?
Like I said in the previous question, wanting to be someone else is a mistake. You need to be strong in what you are as a company, as a person, as a team. And so we focus much more heavily on areas where we have lots of strengths. People come and search for things on Google all the time. The amount of video consumption on YouTube is enormous. We had our Brandcast event last week where we announced that YouTube has more 18 to 49-year-old viewers than any TV or cable channel, and this is just on mobile. So we focus more on using those strengths. And also on mobile, pretty much you and I are also signed in. So our ability to put together these experiences is also substantially higher. Would it be nice to have some other piece of information? Possibly, but we need to do a great job of using the information that we have to deliver a better user experience and better ad products.
So I'm going to use that discussion of data for a slightly awkward transition to a different topic, which is about previous question aside. I mean, obviously, I think everyone knows that Google has a tremendous amount of data. And I was just wondering if you could talk a little bit about how, on the advertising side, you use that data and maybe how that view on data and privacy has evolved.
So I tell my team, and this is the viewpoint that I have, that we are a consumer company first. Our first allegiance is to the user, to deliver great experiences to them, and to make sure that they feel and we are good stewards of their data. So we've always led the way in terms of transparency. We launched like this accounts dashboard last year, which shows you all the data that Google has about you. It also lets you exercise whatever control you want. You don't want Google to have location information? That's fine. You turn that portion off. Some things don't work well. Maybe you don't get great now cards about when you should leave to go for your appointment, but that's the choice that you're making, and we are fine with it. So being good stewards of the data and being very thoughtful about how we use data is a fundamental tenet of how my team operates. And whenever my team comes to me and says that we want to do this use case, I put myself in the shoes of a user and say, is this a use case that the user wants? And having that mentality really helps. And everybody, including the ads team, has that mentality at Google. And that's our true north, and that's what we aspire to.
Do you find that when you give consumers these tools to see what data Google has, how it can be used, that many of them actually use these tools? Because I mean, even personally, I'm incredibly lazy, and I just kind of, I'm like, yeah, all right, whatever, it's fine, just don't do anything super creepy.
Which is why it's especially important that the simple things that you expect continue to stay simple. This is why it's important that we have simple promises to you, that we don't hand over your personal information to any third party. Part is what is scary about the advertising landscape that's out there is the layers of parties that are involved. So none of us is actually sure when we go to a site or when we use an app, the successive layers of companies that have our data. So this is why it's important that we have simple contracts with our users. This is a space which I think where we can innovate more. You'll see more coming from us. But I think we owe it to our users to have simple expectations.
So you said that it's really important to always think of, for your team especially, to think of Google still as primarily a consumer company.
That's right.
With advertising, paying the bills essentially. I do think that as the digital media companies like Google get bigger, there's maybe a little bit more of a tension there because the advertising turns into such an engine for making money that then isn't there some pressure to say, well, it'd be nice to sort of focus on product and consumer product, but really the advertising is really important. We need to really push forward on this.
It's not an either or. I think the vast majority of Google and Alphabet's investments are on great consumer experiences. My team is relatively small in the big scheme of things. We are still pretty successful, and I think that needs to continue to be how we operate. Otherwise, we are doing something wrong.
So another question on sort of advertising within Google is I think actually sort of an interesting case of timing. Around the time that we announced you as a speaker at Disrupt, the information I think ran a profile of you, and sort of there was this narrative that basically there was sort of this political struggle within Google for control of advertising, and you won, which is great. But I'm curious. I mean, is there any truth to that?
There's no truth to that. Susan and I are great colleagues. She's actually been a mentor along with Jeff to me for now over a decade. I owe a lot of my success at Google to Susan. I'm actually really happy that she took over running YouTube. As you saw from Brandcast, the amount of momentum behind YouTube is incredibly strong. We also continue to work closely together. My team does all of ads for YouTube. people have to write somewhat sensationalistic articles, but the truth is far from it. We are colleagues that respect each other, that like each other, and get along great with each other.
So, we should say for people who didn't read it, we're talking about Susan Wojcicki, who's in charge of YouTube. How does your team work with the YouTube team? I mean, because you encompass so many different kinds of ad products, from just the kinds of things you see in search, and then to all the way to the kind of pre-roll fancy video ads that you see in YouTube. I mean, can you just talk a little bit about that whole portfolio and where YouTube fits into it?
Yeah. So I have a team that's dedicated to YouTube ads. YouTube is our flagship video property. And we have this amazing team that does this full time. They work very closely with other people in Susan's team, Robert Kinsel, the business head, Neil Mohan, who used to run display in my team before, and of course Susan, and all the folks in YouTube Consumer, to make sure that we design great ad experiences that work well for YouTube's consumers as well as their monetization. You wrote this article about the 6-second bumper ad that we started experimenting with. We need to be running lots of experiments like that. That's from my team. This is a very tight collaboration from the top to the level of individual engineers, and it's actually a really good collaboration.
So in addition to the current units, I mean, presumably there'll be new units to come in the future. I mean, one interesting area that Google and a ton of other companies are experimenting with is VR. I mean, do you see that as a promising arena for advertising?
It's too early. When we first did Google Now, we said it has to be a great consumer experience before we think of any commercial experience. Similarly, with VR, we should be thinking of great consumer experiences in which commerce and advertising can be a natural complement. We have no one that's working on VR advertising right now. It's just too early. They need to succeed as great consumer products first.
As the guy who's in charge of advertising at Google, you don't have the mindset where you just see something cool and you're like, oh, I wonder what advertising would look like inside there?
Oh, I don't. I put the hat on of what does a great consumer experience there look like. Advertising is one of many different ways to monetize. I mean, part of, I think, an unfortunate evolution over the last 20 years on the internet has been an over-reliance on advertising and less on things like micro-commerce. If it had been the case that on every browser, you and I were signed in, we had our payment credentials, and we thought very differently of, should I pay 3 cents to read this article? I think we might be living in a very different world than the one we are living in today, which is very heavily ad-supported. Mobile actually offers opportunities like that. So I actually think much more in terms of a continuum when it comes to commercialization and monetization, with advertising as one way to do it, tons of other great ways to do it.
So looking ahead, I mean, do you feel like both within Google and the internet as a whole, you're going to see more non-ad monetization emerge and grow?
I think it's important for the health of the internet that actually be the case. And I think mobile makes it possible. All of us are signed in. All of us have our payment credentials within the operating system. But we kind of need to have innovative models for payment, for monetization, for these things to work. I think none of us are able to even make judgments like, is it worth 3 cents to read an article, 5, 6? I think we need to get to a point where there's actually a conversation about these things. I think that'll actually make the internet overall healthier.
I think it should be more for a TechCrunch article, but we can talk about that later.
TechCrunch should be, $1 or $2 per article.
I like where you're going with this. So we're almost out of time. So one last question, which is that obviously there's been a big change sort of in the corporate structure, which is that now Google is part of this larger holding company, Alphabet. For your team, what has been the biggest change since that's happened?
There's been no change for my team or me. That's the amazing part. We used to report to, I reported to Sundar about a year and a half ago. That continues on. We continue to be the monetization engine for Google. Honestly, what Alphabet has brought, it's brought structure to everything that is non-Google, which I think is great to have discipline there. It has also given us, Sundar, a great CEO to run Google. Google's the information part of Alphabet. And as you can imagine, that's a pretty big job. And so to have someone full-time dedicated to that, with the team that's dedicated full-time to just Google, is actually a hugely positive change. It's been great for all of us.
And I think there's a sense that this is probably even true before, but that given that advertising, whether it's under Alphabet or under Google, is advertising is sort of the engine that sort of funds all this other cool stuff that you guys are doing. Would you agree with that? I mean, is that still kind of the sense?
That has been the case. That's how the numbers have always worked out. But we also continue to explore other great business models. We're doing very well in both cloud and apps. We recently hired Diane Green. one of the founders of VMware, to head that effort. So you see us diversifying even within Google. But right now, yeah, Google drives a lot. I mean, advertising drives a lot of Google's revenue. And, you know, that's a good thing.
Great. Well, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for your time.
Thanks.
Thank you.